Chapter 19, A Flood of Tips. Authorities continued their work at Hoffman's house, photographing, collecting, and cataloging a variety of items. In addition to the strange drawings on the bathroom wall that Sarah had noticed, the most unusual were the many bags of leaves, which were attached to the walls and scattered around the house. Every square inch of open space along the walls was taken up with these bags. There was also loose leaves scattered around the floor and bags that had not yet been filled. It was as if the purpose of the whole house was to become a repository for leaves. None of the leaves had been there when Hoffman's girlfriend moved out just weeks previously. Items were being seized from Matt Hoffman's silver Toyota Yaris as well. These included a used roll of duct tape, a Lowe's store receipt in a trash bag, and a receipt from a Mount Vernon Duchess shop, a gas station convenience store. There was also a receipt from McDonald's, a sandwich container on the back seat, and a Walmart bag. Also seized was a small suitcase with tree climbing gear inside. One of the more ominous findings was a folding saw in a suitcase on the front passenger seat. Every bit of evidence was looked at, no matter how small. Anything could hold a clue as to where Tina, Cody, and Stephanie were. The items were like scattered pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and the investigators still had no idea what the total puzzle looked like. On November 14th, a strange call came into KCSO at 7:36 p.m. A message sheet was notated. Quote, "Detectives, Captain, or whoever, Ron Metcalf is demanding to speak with someone about yesterday and wants a protection order." Unquote. Just what the protection order was all about was not mentioned on the form. Around the same time, a Kelly G. left a message for Captain Schaefer. "There is a smell outside of the Humane Society. It smells like something decaying." And a woman who would not give her name told detectives to check the cave's campground. A man named Mike M. reported, "I was friends with Matt Hoffman before he went to Colorado. Matthew was very familiar with the Apple Valley Clubhouse area and also the Spillway area." Then Mike said that Hoffman had been hanging around with a certain male friend since getting back from Colorado, and Mike gave that person's name. Matt Cox, principal of Mount Vernon Middle School, related that a student had told him that he used to go swimming with Matthew Hoffman and do other things. KCSO later contacted this student. Larry H. told the dispatcher at KCSO, "Friday evening by Riverside Park, there was a tall guy, very thin, looking over the bridge. He had a kid with him who looked to be about 6 to 10 years old." And Carolyn H. noted that on Thursday night after dark at 7 p.m., she heard a vehicle stop by the tan house to the right of hers, directly behind which were some woods. She heard someone get out of the vehicle. The person was nearby, and she could hear a lot of rustling of leaves. It scared her so badly she ran back into her house. People also called to share specific details about Matthew Hoffman. A man told KCSO, "Matthew Hoffman likes to cut through Foundation Park with his car. He almost hit me there one day." Kathy M. said, "Heard a long thud and loud scream at about 3:30 a.m. in the morning earlier in the week. This was in an area near Hoffman's residence." An individual named Mike B. related that on Wednesday, November 10th, between 3 and 4 p.m., he was on the Kokosing Gap Trail, heading west just past the railroad bridge, and there were 2 people below the bridge. Mike said, "There was a girl sitting on her butt with her hands behind her. A man was kneeling in front of her. The female had some clothes laying in front of her." Mark M. contacted authorities and said, "Across the street from a rental equipment company is a white barn. Behind that are 4-wheel trails. Matthew and I used to go back there and hang out. We were back there all the time." Another person got in contact with an officer and related, "Check trees for evidence. Matt talked about living in trees. He always carried ropes and a chainsaw in his trunk." Some of the tips were coming in from much farther away than the local community. Ron F. of Chicago claimed to have spotted the two missing women and the boy in Chicago. Stanley O. of Chattanooga, Tennessee, was sure he had spotted the women and boy at a Raceway gas station there. Another strange tip came in from a woman named Cornella K. from Rhode Island. She stated from the photograph she saw, Matthew Hoffman appeared to have a very peculiar messed up nose and twisted ears. Genetic abnormalities which affect the physical body to such an extent tend to also affect the brain and glands. Cornella thought that Hoffman's lawyer should become involved so that he could find an expert analyst in such abnormalities. This expert might persuade Hoffman to reveal where the missing people were. Cornella signed off, doing all in the name, reputation of the Lord Jesus the Christ. Gary C. of Long Beach, California claimed, "I'm a psychic from California. Kokosing Gap Trail at the intersection of State Route 36 goes under State Route 36, north, east, and southwest. Take the trail south for 1,000 feet. Another small trail runs along that trail. Go east to Howard Street in Howard. Where the two trails branch off is where bodies are covered with red plastic." A later note by authorities related that the Knox County Emergency Management Agency Director, Brian Hess, went there, but found nothing. Another psychic phoned in and said, "The three others are still alive. They are being held by a white male, 45 to 50 years old. He is of medium build and rough-looking. He is unemployed and staying in a house owned by his mother. This is in an adjacent county, probably east of Mount Vernon. He knows the family or family friend and has done work around the house. He used a weapon to get them in an older van or SUV. The suspect in jail knows this subject and will crack during interrogation." KCSO by Sunday evening was nearly overwhelmed by the amount of work they were now tasked with. Assignments included the ongoing search of Matthew Hoffman's residence and seizure of items therein, the interrogation of Hoffman, who had yet to divulge what had happened to Tina, Cody, and Sarah and Stephanie, the taking in and logging of the tips, the coordination of the volunteer search efforts, and the dispensing of news to the horde of television and print journalists whose news vehicles and satellite trucks were camped out in the KCSO parking lot. This last matter was a huge headache for the office in general and for Sheriff David Barber in particular. Nothing like this had ever happened in Knox County before. To help in this regard, FBI Special Agent Harry Thrombitis made a list of suggestions about how to deal with the media and what information to dispense to them. Sheriff Barber was grateful for the advice and used it as a template in his remarks to reporters. Thrombitis started out by suggesting that the sheriff release this statement, quote, "Based on evidence discovered at the true crime scenes and what investigators have learned through various interviews, the Knox County Sheriff's Office is moving into a new phase of the investigation, and we are now conducting a two-pronged investigative approach. Prong 1 deals with the blood at the initial scene and the recovery of Sarah. Investigators are considering the possibility that the three missing persons may have been in fact killed," unquote. Thrombitis added that because of what was known so far, the bodies of the three may have been moved to an undisclosed location by Matt Hoffman or someone helping him, and suggested that KCSO now ask all citizens of the region to think back to the afternoon of Wednesday, November 10th or Thursday, November 11th, and report any unusual sightings of suspicious persons or activity they may have witnessed. Citizens of the county, especially in rural areas near Mount Vernon and Apple Valley, should search their properties for recent tire marks or places where a person could have driven in with a vehicle, especially in areas where there was concealing foliage or outbuildings. The statement also instructed people not to touch anything that looked suspicious, but to call KCSO immediately. Prong 2 dealt with the chance that Tina, Cody, and Stephanie could still be alive. Thrombitis told Barber, now may be a good time to give the media photos of the 3 vehicles that were known to be involved: the Toyota Yaris, the pickup, and the Jeep. Sometimes seeing an image is far superior in jogging the memory of a citizen than just a verbal description. Thrombitis ended his message to Sheriff Barber by stating he would advise not giving out any additional information about the 2 crime scenes, Tina's home on King Beach Drive and Matt Hoffman's residence on Columbus Road. And he also suggested that Sheriff Barber schedule formal press conferences at specific hours each day. Larry Maynard and his family had their own challenges dealing with the swarm of media that surrounded their home. Never in their wildest dreams had any of them ever imagined they would be placed in such a position. Larry recalled, "There were news vans and satellite trucks all up and down our street. The reporters were constantly ringing the doorbell, and at first I just told them I wasn't giving any interviews. After a while, I put up a sign, 'Don't ring the doorbell or knock. Please respect our privacy.' It didn't help. They kept ringing the doorbell and asking for interviews anyway. Phone calls were coming in from everywhere, local news stations and national ones. We were even getting calls from overseas, and talk shows were calling as well. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. We felt like we were trapped in our own house. It was horrible. We were hunkered down like prisoners in our own house. We had Sarah back." She was at home with Larry and his family at that point. "And that was great, but we couldn't stop worrying about Cody, Tina, and Stephanie. I could barely eat. I could barely sleep. I'd just go from a daze into kind of a half sleep, and then it was mostly just falling into a daze in a chair." At 7:15 p.m. on November 14th, an interesting development took place. BCI&I Special Agent Joe Dietz convinced Matthew Hoffman to take a ride with him in an effort to refresh his memory about what had occurred. As Dietz wrote in a report, "Detective Turpin, Special Agent Cadu, and I accompanied Hoffman on this drive to different parts of Knox County." The investigators' reports later stated precisely when and where they had gone, noting that they had left the sheriff's office, drove to Hoffman's mother's house, and then by Tina Herman's house. They went down Majors Road, turned around, and went by Tina's house, and again by Hoffman's mother's house once more. Then they drove to the ball fields at East Knox Middle School, and later by the baseball field in Howard. They stopped off at a Burger King for some food, went on to Foundation Park, and finally back to the sheriff's office. Alas, the trip was a bust, as Hoffman did not reveal anything as to where Tina, Cody, and Stephanie might be found. Attempts to have Matthew Hoffman answer questions continued into Monday, November 15th. Detective David Light noted, "He would occasionally drink some water, but would not even answer if he wanted a bathroom break." The efforts to have him speak included FBI agent Kristen Cadu, but he would not talk much about the incidents that led to his arrest. Though investigators were determined to get information out of Matthew Hoffman, and they tried all the interrogation techniques standard in these kind of interviews, Hoffman remained absolutely silent.